My father said walking me down the aisle would be disrespectful to my stepmother. 2 weeks before my wedding, I made a decision that changed everything. I am a 28-year-old woman, and I got married last Saturday. My father was not there. Not because he could not make it. Not because of distance or illness or emergency. Because 2 weeks before my wedding he told me that walking me down the aisle would be disrespectful to my stepmother. And I told him not to come at all. This is the story of how one phone call ended a relationship that had been dying for 8 years. And how my wedding became the most honest day of my life. The remarriage. My parents divorced when I was 15. Not a surprise divorce. They had been unhappy for years. The divorce was almost a relief. Dad moved out. Got an apartment. Had me and my younger brother Lucas every other weekend. It was hard but manageable. Dad was still dad. Present. Interested. Showed up. For 2 years it was fine. Then he met Diane. She was 42. He was 45. She had 2 kids from a previous marriage, both older than me and Lucas. Already out of the house. They dated for 6 months. Got engaged. Married 4 months later. Suddenly Dad had a whole new family. And we became the old one. The shift. The shift was not immediate. It was gradual. Like watching someone walk away slowly enough that you keep thinking they might turn around. Dad started canceling weekends. Diane needed him for something. Diane's daughter was visiting. Diane was not feeling well. Always Diane. When we did see him it was at their house. A house that never felt like it had space for us. Diane was polite. Not warm. Not mean. Just polite in a way that made it clear we were guests in her home. She had rules. No shoes in the house. No eating in the living room. No being too loud because she had migraines. Dad enforced them all. My 16th birthday was the first one he missed. Diane's mother was sick, and they had to drive to see her. My high school graduation he came to but left immediately after. Diane was waiting in the car. She did not come in. Lucas's 18th birthday Dad forgot entirely. Called 3 days later to apologize. He and Diane had been on a trip to wine country. We were fading. Slowly. But definitely. College. I went to college 3 hours away. Dad said he was proud. Said he would help however he could. He sent a check for $500 my first semester. Nothing after that. When I asked if he could help with textbooks, he said money was tight with Diane's renovations to the house. When I asked if he could come to Parents' Weekend, he said Diane had planned a trip that weekend, and it was too late to cancel. When I called just to talk, he would chat for 10 minutes and then say he had to go. Diane needed something. Lucas stopped calling him at 19. Just stopped. Dad noticed after 3 weeks and called to ask why Lucas was not staying in touch. Lucas said, I have been trying to stay in touch for 4 years, and you have been too busy with Diane. I am done trying. Dad said Lucas was being unfair. That he loved us. That Diane was his wife and deserved respect. Lucas said respect goes both ways. They did not talk for 6 months after that. I stayed in contact. Called every few weeks. Kept trying. Because he was my dad. And I kept hoping he would wake up and notice what he was losing. He did not. The engagement. I met Ryan when I was 25. He was kind. Funny. Present in a way I had never experienced before. He met my mom and stepdad within a month. They loved him. He met my dad and Diane 4 months into our relationship. Dinner at a restaurant. Neutral ground. Dad shook Ryan's hand. Asked what he did for work. Made small talk. Diane spent most of the dinner on her phone. When Ryan went to the bathroom, Dad leaned over and said, He seems nice, but do not rush into anything. Diane, and I think you are too young for something serious. I was 25. He had married Diane after 6 months of dating when he was 45. But I was too young for something serious. Ryan proposed on a Saturday morning in our apartment. Simple. Perfect. Just us. I called Dad that afternoon. He answered on the 4th ring. I said, Dad. Ryan proposed. I said yes. He said, oh, well. Congratulations. I waited for more. There was not more. I said, Are you happy for me? He said, Of course. I just wish you had waited a bit longer.
You are so young.
But if you are sure, then I am happy for you. I said, I am sure. He said, Let me talk to Diane, and we'll figure out a good time to celebrate. We never did celebrate. Every time I suggested getting together, something came up. Eventually, I stopped suggesting. The wedding planning. Ryan and I planned a small wedding. 100 people. A venue an hour from where we lived. 6 months of planning. I sent Dad a save the date as soon as we booked the venue. 8 months before the wedding. He texted back. Got it. Looks great. I called him 2 months before the wedding to talk about details. I said, Dad, I wanted to ask you something. He said, Sure. I said, Will you walk me down the aisle? He said, Of course. I would love to. I felt something warm in my chest. A little bit of hope. I said, Thank you.
It means a lot to me.
He said, You're my daughter. Of course I will be there. We talked for another 20 minutes. Longest conversation we had had in months. I hung up feeling lighter than I had felt in years. Ryan asked, How did it go? I said, He is going to walk me down the aisle. Ryan hugged me. He knew how much that mattered. For 2 months, I felt hopeful. Then 2 weeks before the wedding, Dad called. The phone call. I answered on the second ring. I said, Hi, Dad. He said, Hi, sweetheart. Do you have a minute to talk? I said, Of course. What is up? He said, I need to talk to you about the wedding. My stomach dropped. I knew from his tone something was wrong. He said, Diane and I have been talking, and she has some concerns about the ceremony. I said, What concerns? He said, About me walking you down the aisle. I said, What about it? He said, Diane feels that it is disrespectful to her if I walk you down the aisle when your mother is already involved in the wedding. I said, Mom is not walking me down the aisle.
She is just a guest.
You are the one walking me. He said, I know. But Diane feels that by me participating in that way, it sends a message that I am choosing your mother's family over the family I have now. I could not breathe for a second. I said, I am your family. I am your daughter. He said, Of course you are. But Diane is my wife. And she feels strongly about this. She thinks it would be better if I sit with her in the audience instead of being part of the ceremony. I said, 2 months ago you said you would walk me down the aisle. 2 weeks before my wedding you are backing out because Diane does not like it? He said, I am not backing out. I will be there. I just cannot walk you down the aisle. I said, Those are the same thing. He said, Can you try to see it from Diane's perspective? This is hard for her. I said, What is hard for her? Watching her husband walk his daughter down the aisle at her wedding? He said, She feels excluded, like she is not part of my life with you kids. I said, She is not part of my life, Dad. She chose not to be. She has barely spoken to me in 8 years. And now she gets to veto you walking me down the aisle? He said, I am asking you to understand. Diane is important to me. I do not want to hurt her. I said, What about hurting me? He was quiet.
I said, Dad.
I am your daughter. This is my wedding. I am asking you to walk me down the aisle. That is a normal thing. A thing fathers do. And you are saying no because Diane does not like it. He said, I am not saying no. I am just saying I cannot walk you down the aisle. But I will be there. I will celebrate with you. We can have a dance at the reception. I said, No.
He said, What?
I said, If you cannot walk me down the aisle, then do not come at all. He said, That is not fair. I said, What is not fair is you choosing your wife's feelings over being there for your daughter on the most important day of her life. What is not fair is you calling 2 weeks before my wedding to tell me this. What is not fair is 8 years of you putting Diane first in every single situation. I am done accepting it. He said, You're being dramatic. I will be there. I just will not walk you down the aisle. I said, I do not want you there if you are not willing to show up fully. Do not come to my wedding.
He said, You do not mean that.
I said, I completely mean that. You made your choice. Diane over me.
So stay home with Diane.
Do not come. He said, You're going to regret this. I said, the only thing I regret is spending 8 years hoping you would choose me for once. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up, and then I cried for 2 hours. The aftermath. Ryan held me while I cried. When I could finally talk, I told him everything Dad had said. Ryan was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I do not want him there." I meant what I said. If he cannot walk me down the aisle, I do not want him there at all. Ryan said, "Okay. Then he is not coming." What about your brother? Lucas. I had not even thought about Lucas. I called him. I told him what happened. He said, "I am not surprised." I said, "Are you still coming to the wedding?" He said, "Of course. I am your brother. I would not miss it." I said, "I told Dad not to come." He said, "Good. He does not deserve to be there." I said, "Will you walk me down the aisle?" Silence. Then, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yes. You are the only family who has consistently shown up for me. I want you to walk me down the aisle." He said, "I would be honored." And just like that, my wedding party changed. The family reaction. Dad called back 3 times that night. I did not answer. He left voicemails. The first, "You are making a mistake. Call me back." The second, "I am your father. You cannot uninvite me from your wedding." The third, "Fine. If that is how you want it, then do not expect me to be part of your life going forward." I saved them all. Not to use against him. Just to remember that I made the right choice. Diane texted the next morning, "Your father is devastated. You're being selfish and cruel. This is what happens when children do not respect their parents' marriages." I blocked her number. Dad's sister, my Aunt Carol, called. She said, "I heard what happened." I said, "What did Dad tell you?" She said, "That you uninvited him because he could not walk you down the aisle." I said, "That is not what happened. He told me 2 weeks before my wedding that walking me down the aisle would be disrespectful to Diane. I told him if he could not show up for me, then not to come at all." Aunt Carol was quiet. Then she said, "That sounds exactly like something he would do." I said, "You are not surprised?" She said, "I have watched him disappear into that marriage for 8 years. I have watched him choose Diane over you and Lucas every single time. I am not surprised. I am just sorry." I said, "Are you still coming?" She said, "Yes. And I am bringing your uncle and your cousins. We are showing up for you even if your father will not." I cried again, but different tears this time. The wedding day. My wedding was last Saturday. Small ceremony. 100 guests. Perfect weather. I wore a dress my mom helped me pick out. Simple. Elegant. Felt like me. Lucas wore a suit and stood in the back of the venue with me before the ceremony started. He said, "Are you sure about this?" I said, "About marrying Ryan or about Dad not being here?" He said, "Both." I said, "I am completely sure about Ryan. And I am sad about Dad. But I am sure about that too." Lucas squeezed my hand. He said, "For what it is worth, I think you are the bravest person I know." The music started. Lucas offered me his arm. We walked down the aisle together. My baby brother, 26 years old, walking me to the man I was going to marry. When we reached the front, Lucas hugged me and whispered, "I love you." Then he sat down next to Mom. I looked at Ryan. He was crying. Happy tears. I was crying too. The ceremony was perfect. No drama. No interruptions. Just love and commitment, and people who actually wanted to be there. At the reception, Lucas gave a toast. He said, "Most people would talk about how they have known the bride her whole life. I have known her my whole life. And I have watched her be stronger than anyone should have to be. I have watched her keep showing up for people who did not show up for her. I have watched her finally choose herself. And today I got to walk her down the aisle because the person who should have been there could not manage to put her first even on her wedding day. His loss. Because my sister is the best person I know. And Ryan is lucky to have her. To my sister, who taught me what real strength looks like." Everyone clapped. Some people cried. I hugged Lucas so hard he laughed and said he could not breathe. It was the best day of my life. And my father was not there to see it. 3 days after. Dad texted 3 days after the wedding. I heard the wedding was beautiful. I hope you're happy. I would have been there if you had not uninvited me. I stared at the text for a long time. Brian asked, "Are you going to respond?" I said, "I do not know." I thought about it for an hour. Then I wrote back, "You were invited. You chose not to walk me down the aisle because Diane thought it was disrespectful. I told you that if you could not show up fully, I did not want you there at all. You made your choice. I made mine. The wedding was beautiful. I am happy. I hope someday you understand what you missed. But I am not waiting around for that understanding anymore." I did not add, "I love you." I did not add, "I forgive you." I just sent the truth. He did not respond. 1 month after. It has been 1 month since my wedding. Lucas and I talk twice a week now. He has become my family in a way Dad never was. Mom and my stepdad have been incredible. Supportive without being pushy. Present without smothering. Aunt Carol took me to lunch last week. She said Dad called her asking if she thought I would ever talk to him again. She told him, "That depends on whether you are willing to acknowledge what you did." He said he did not do anything wrong. He was just trying to respect his wife. Aunt Carol said, "Then no. She probably will not talk to you again."
Because you still do not see it.
I asked her, "Do you think he will ever see it?" She said, "I do not know. Some people are too invested in their version of events to see the truth." I said, "That makes me sad." She said, "Me too." Ryan and I went on our honeymoon. 2 weeks in Italy. We ate pasta and drank wine and walked through ancient cities and did not talk about my father once. It was exactly what I needed. When we got back, there was a card in the mail from Diane. It said, "I am sorry your father could not be part of your wedding. I hope you understand he was in a difficult position. I hope we can move forward as a family." There was no acknowledgement of her role. No apology for the demand that created the difficult position. Just, "I hope we can move forward." I threw the card away. Where I am now. I am married to a man who shows up. Who makes me coffee in the morning without being asked. Who holds me when I am sad about my father and does not try to fix it. Who tells me every day that I made the right choice. I have a brother who walked me down the aisle and calls me just to talk. I have a mother who has never made me choose between her needs and my own. I have aunts and uncles and cousins who showed up to my wedding and have stayed in my life. I have a chosen family that is better than the one I was born into. And I have a father who chose his wife's comfort over his daughter's wedding. That is painful. It will probably always be painful. But it is not a wound I am reopening anymore. I am done hoping he will change. Done waiting for him to choose me. Done accepting crumbs and calling it love. I am building a life with people who know how to show up. And that is enough. What I learned that you can love someone and still refuse to accept how they treat you. I learned that respecting marriage is often code for accepting unacceptable behavior. I learned that parents who ask you to understand their new spouse's feelings rarely ask that spouse to understand yours. I learned that some people will choose their current comfort over their lifelong relationships. And that choice tells you everything you need to know. I learned that weddings show you who people really are. When they decide whether to show up or stay home, you learn what you actually mean to them. And I learned that having your brother walk you down the aisle can be just as meaningful as having your father do it. Maybe more. Because it was earned through years of actually being there. For everyone asking, do you regret telling him not to come?
No.
I regret that he forced me to make that choice. But I do not regret making it. Will you ever reconcile? Maybe. If he genuinely understands what he did and why it was wrong. But I am not holding my breath. And I am not waiting. How is your relationship with Lucas? Better than ever. He is my family in the truest sense. What about future events? Kids? Will your dad meet them? I do not know. That depends on whether he can show up for them the way he could not show up for me. Right now, I am not counting on it. What would you tell someone in the same situation? You are allowed to have standards for your wedding. You are allowed to say if you cannot fully participate, then do not come at all. You are not required to accept someone's conditional presence at the most important day of your life. Choose people who choose you. Are you happy?
Yes. Genuinely. Completely.
For the first time in years, I am not holding space for people who will not hold space for me. And it turns out that makes room for actual happiness.
End.
My father said walking me down the aisle would be disrespectful to my stepmother. 2 weeks before my wedding, I told him not to come. He called it dramatic, unfair, a mistake I would regret. I called it boundary setting. My brother walked me down the aisle instead. The man who had shown up for me for 26 years. Not the man who had been disappearing for 8. It was the right choice. I would make it again. Every single time.